Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 1989 survival thriller Survival Quest. Now this is a film that I had been curious about seeing for a long time. I saw the trailer for the movie on a VHS. I don't remember exactly which one it was. It definitely had to be an MGM movie because this was eventually released on home video through MGM, and it was MGM that actually decided to pick the film up and distribute it. Because this film was apparently finished and was in the can in 1986, but there was no distributor that could be found. Nobody wanted to release it, and it was left on a shelf collecting dust until MGM was like, all right, we'll give this a shot. And to be perfectly honest, I can see why it was left on the shelf, because it's not really that good of a movie, and I'll get into why soon enough. But anyway, it did eventually get a release of some sort by MGM, and they did some advertising. Didn't do a whole lot of it. There's a trailer, but I don't think it got that wide of a release. It wasn't marketed very heavily, and even if it was, I don't think the film would have done that well, because despite the fact that it's got a solid cast of genre actors, I don't really feel that they were well known enough to attract a wide audience. And the plot, while I personally find it to be intriguing, I can see why other people would be like, this is really not anything that I'm really excited about. But finally, I found a good quality version of this film to watch, and I finally was able to scratch that survival quest itch, because I had been wanting to see the film for the longest time. And sadly, it really did not live up to a lot of my expectations for it, and it was definitely disappointing. Now, that being said, I don't think this film is totally worthless. I don't think this film is an absolute total pile of shit, and that's the reason why it's disappointing. If a movie is just straight up garbage, then it's not really that disappointing, because it's just straight up garbage. When you have a film like Survival Quest, which has quite a few elements in it that are strong, but there are other things about it and other aspects of it that just fall so short of the potential, that's when you have a disappointing film. And sad to say, Survival Quest is one of those movies, for me personally anyway. Now, this film, like I said, it was released in 1989, but it was finished in 1986. It's 96 minutes long, and to be honest, after a certain point in the movie, about halfway through, it starts to really feel like it's 120 minutes. It really starts to slow down to a crawl, and it's not really that thrilling or that exciting, and in a lot of ways it's pretty frustrating, and I will explain why as pretty soon, because this film has some really serious flaws in it that just make it collapse under its own weight. Now, it's directed by Don Coscarelli, who also wrote the film, and he was one of the producers, and he edited the movie. So this is Don's film in so many different ways. And I like Don Coscarelli. I think he's a solid director. I love Phantasm. I enjoy The Beastmaster. And I liked Phantasm 2. And I didn't mind Phantasm 3 either. But this film is just... this is Don out in the wilderness, trying to figure out how to do a non-horror film, or a film that isn't a part of an exploitation genre. I think this is his attempt to try to show studios that he could do other types of movies. And I'm not going to say it was a failed attempt, but I'm going to say that it did prove that this just isn't the type of film for Don. This is some really mediocre direction. It doesn't have the same flair or the same passion as a lot of his other work has. You could tell that he's not really that comfortable with this source material, despite the fact that he seemingly really liked this idea. And I can see why he liked the idea. I like the idea a lot. The idea of a group of likable characters who go on a survival quest in the wilderness, and they have to survive the elements, as well as a group of paramilitary extreme survivalists who start to go off the rails. I think that's a really good idea for a film, and a great concept for a thriller, and maybe a great concept for like a horror thriller. And honestly, I think that's the direction this film should have gone. It really should have. Don should have embraced his horror roots and made this a horror thriller. I think if it was a horror thriller, the horror elements were expanded upon a lot more, this would be a much more satisfying and a much better film. But he avoided that. It's like every chance that this film had to embrace that identity, it just kept going further and further away from it. And this type of movie, with this type of location and with this director, it's just not a direction that it should have taken, if you ask me, because it just makes it really lukewarm and fairly lame at more than one occasion. Now, yeah, the direction is pretty mediocre. It's nothing really to write home about. I would say it's honestly the least impressive film in terms of direction that I've seen from Don. A lot of the time, he can take a low budget and really make it seem like it's more than what they had to work with. I don't really see that with this movie. There's a couple scenes in the wilderness that I think were shot all right, decently. One scene in particular, the only really thrilling, suspenseful scene in the entire film, if you ask me, where the survival group is trying to stay one step ahead of the extreme survivalists, and they get on, a couple of them get on top of this log, and it's going down the river, and they have to get off it before it falls off a waterfall. That was actually well shot and was quite suspenseful. But the other stuff, it just felt like just nature photography. You know, it wasn't anything super impressive. And it's just one of those movies where even the nature stuff just seemed like it wasn't really that mesmerizing. It wasn't really that eye-opening or that eye-popping in terms of the visuals. And that goes to the direction. And I definitely feel that Don should have hired another writer, because this film really needed a extra voice to punch up the dialogue, to add more action to it, because there's nowhere near enough of it, to add more thrills. I know it's a low-budget film, but Phantasm was a low-budget movie. A lot of these other films that Don did were low-budget films. There's tons of PM Entertainment movies that are low-budget films, and they have tons of action, and they have tons of thrills. So I don't buy, oh, it's a low budget, they couldn't really get away with it. I mean, I doubt that Whitewater Summer was that big of a budgeted film either. So it's one of those things where you really needed to have someone else to throw in their point of view, and to throw in some more action bits and some more intrigue and some more spectacle, really. For a film that has a tagline which, in the wilderness you can't call 911, like, you're thinking like it's going to be really, really serious, and it's going to be like really intense, and even from the trailer you think that's what it might be, but it isn't. It isn't really serious, and it isn't really intense. And a big part of that is the screenplay, the script. It seems like it's two different movies. The beginning, that first half, which is the strongest half of the film, seems like it's a film about a group of people who are trying to better themselves and learn how to become stronger individuals. And it's more of a drama, a coming-of-age drama for adults, But then it tries to be a thriller, and it's just nowhere near as effective because just Don is out of his comfort zone here, and he's not going for the horror route, so he's trying to go with a serious thriller route, but it's a car crash because of the writing and because of certain actors that he cast in particular roles. Now, speaking of the actors, I'm going to do a quick rundown of the cast. So you have Lance Henriksen, who is absolutely fantastic in his role as Hank. I love this character. I love his performance. It just one of his most underrated film roles for sure. And because I love this performance and I love this character so much, the fact that he doesn't really get that much to do in this movie is really disheartening. And it's really a letdown. Because Lance Henriksen is a great actor, and he shows it again here. There's a scene that he has with Dermot Mulroney's character in the film Gray that's really poignant, where he's talking about his past and so on and so forth, and sharing some moments with Gray and letting him know that he's not alone, that he was also an orphan and he was also a foster kid, and he had some bad times in his life and so on and so forth. And he's talking about the first foster parent that he had that really helped him believe in himself and show him that there's more to life than just getting shipped from home to home and getting abused. And it's a really poignant, really well acted scene from Lance Henriksen and Dermot Mulroney. And he's got a great charisma about him. He's got a good story. He has a couple moments where it looks like he's going to do some badass stuff. And it's going to build up to some explosive finale where Lance Henriksen and Mark Rolston, they go head to head, and there's fireworks that explode everywhere. And that never happens. Lance Henriksen gets shot. He gets wounded. He disappears for, it seems like, half the movie. He hangs out in a cave. He cauterizes his own wound with a super hot knife and is catering to a wounded Mark Rolston, who plays the character Jake. And then he's there for Jake in his last moments. And then he gets on a plane with the pilot, played by Reggie Bannister, and is ready to meet with his pupils at the end of the movie after they've survived. And that's all he did. He had one little moment where he stole Rolston's knife in a pretty cool scene. He talked tough. He looked the part. But he never had a single scene in this film where he kicked any ass, where he took some names. And that is such a missed opportunity. You have Lance Henriksen, who's really giving his all, and you have a good character, and it looks like it's going to be a showdown between ideologies and individuals in Jake and Hank, and that never happens either. So, and that goes right to Don with this screenplay. I mean, how do you have Lance Henriksen and have a character this strong and waste him so much? It is such a waste. And then you have Mark Rolston, who you might recognize from Aliens. You know, Lance Henriksen was in Aliens. He played Bishop. And in this, he plays Jake Cannon, who's the leader of this extreme paramilitary group. And I really thought Mark Rolston did a really good job. I thought he did a great job in this role. He was intimidating. He was freaky. I totally bought into this character, into his performance as this unhinged leader of this survivalist group who's taking things to new extremes. Just an overly militaristic guy. And I thought it was a really good performance. And just like Lance Henriksen's character, Hank, Jake is also wasted too. Because you think it's going to build up to some... He's going to be the leader of this group. He's going to send them over the edge. and it's going to be up to Lance Henriksen and his survival quest team to stop him and his team. And that never happens. Honestly, that's how you could sum up a lot of the film's problems. They never happen. You know, these things don't happen. So there's all these things you're like, man, this could be really cool and this could be really good, and then it never happens. That's why this isn't a good movie to me. That's why it's below average. Because of the fact that there are so many things that it could have, even if it just got one of them right. Like just having Lance Henriksen be the lead and do more. That would have made the film at least a time waster for me. But that doesn't happen. And Rolston is wasted just about as much as Lance Henriksen is, because they're both wounded and he dies actually. So he's even more of a waste. Because he ends up dying. Like, that's the ultimate waste. And speaking of waste, you have a waste of space in Steve Antin as Raider. Now, this is one of the biggest crippling blows to this film. This is a hammer to the back of this movie's head, or a giant log just slams straight into its fucking face. Because Steve Antin is an atrocious actor. He is a poor man's Eric Freeman. And if you know who I'm talking about, it's the Garbage Day guy from Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. When you're a poor man's Eric Freeman, you are one hell of a shitty actor. Because Eric Freeman is not a good actor. But his acting is so bad that it's good. Steve Antin's acting is so bad that it's just bad. And it's unbearably bad. It's unbelievably bad. And I'm not surprised, because this is the guy who played Troy in The Goonies, and he sucked in that too. I mean, nothing about his line delivery in that movie was good. Daddy! You Goonie! His acting is awful. He's one of the worst parts of The Goonies. Because seems like everyone else in that film is at least a competent actor. And this guy is over here just tripping over his own shoelaces and just shitting himself. Because he's such a shitty actor. That whole scene where you have this really great performance with Sean Astin where he's talking about, this is our time. It's our time down here. And then you have, you goody! It's just, he really hurts that scene a little bit because of how bad of an actor he is. And he was barely tolerable in that film because he just had a cameo. In this, he becomes the lead villain. Yes, that guy. The Daddy! That guy is the lead villain in this movie. He plays Raider. And it is such a... Oh, man. It's such a irritating performance to watch. Because he's supposed to be intimidating. He's supposed to be this psycho who, like, you're actually like, holy shit, like, this guy's unhinged. This guy's on the edge. And it's not believable at all because he can't pull it off to save his life. If you ask me, the real survival quest is surviving Steve Antin's shitty acting in this movie. That's what the real survival quest is when it comes to survival quest. I mean, it is that bad. And he doesn't, it's not like he's like a super big douchebag who's like really unlikable. And to the point where you're like, just, I can't wait for this guy to die. No, he's just really insufferably whiny and petulant. And then when he finally gets his comeuppance, it's not even anything worth mentioning. It's just as forgettable as most of the movie. because he's just a dumbass and doesn't pay attention and gets blown up. That's really what happens. And it's rather fitting because he's honestly the guy who blew the film up, if you ask me, alongside Don Coscarelli. I mean, Don, what were you thinking, man? Like, how could you see a screen test with this guy and be like, yep, that's the guy. That's the guy I'm going to have play Raider. He's going to be the lead villain. It's just such a mistake. It is such a mistake. I mean, if you ever get around to seeing this movie, you will see exactly what I mean when it comes to his performance. This guy is so out of his league. He's in outer space. He's floating in outer space, man, because he's just not prepared for this. The rest of the cast, they do a fine job. I mean, even Michael Ian Ryder is fine as Harper, Paul Provenza as Joey, Ben Hammer as Hal, Dominic Hoffman as Jeff, Traci Lind as Olivia. She doesn't really given a whole lot to do except really be eye candy and a love interest for Dermot Mulroney's character Gray. But I'm not going to complain because I like Traci Lind, and you actually get to see her topless in one scene, which was a nice surprise. But because I've always had a crush on her ever since I was a kid when I saw her in My Boyfriend's Back. And Catherine Keener is also in this. She starts off a bit iffy with her performance, but once she starts showing her strengths when it comes to her character, she shows her strengths as an actress and delivers a ultimately solid performance. You might recognize her from Get Out. She played the lady with the spoon, who's hypnotizing people. So, yeah, this is an early role for her, and I think she pulled it off quite nicely. Dermot Mulroney, who you might recognize from Young Guns, he's in this as Gray, who arguably you could say is the lead. And he's the only guy in the cast that really gets to do anything particularly badass or cool. But even then, it's not really that cool. He cuts a line that one of the extreme survivalists is trying to climb on to try across some rocks to try to get to the survival quest group, and he cuts the line and makes the guy fall into the water, and then he shoots a gun a couple times. He gets shot in the leg, and then he's the one that tricks Raider because he's a dipshit, he's a dumbass, and he shoots the gas tank and blows him up along with the rest of his goons. And it's not much, really. It's not like he's really given a whole lot to do, and it's not really that much of it. He's the one that gets the most action, but there really isn't that much action at all, so I guess he's given the most to do, but what he has to do isn't much. And speaking of isn't much, I would say the score is not much to write home about at all. It's by Fred Myrow and Christopher L. Stone, and I know that these two can do a way better job with scores than this. They did Phantasm. It's a great score. This is generic. This is horribly generic. The main theme is, I guess, serviceable, but it just sounds like any other main theme for this type of movie. It's just nothing. It really is nothing. Like, it's inoffensive. Like, it's not irritating or particularly really bad, but it's just a type of score that's just air. It leaves no impression on you. It doesn't add anything to the scenes. There are times where it sounds really cheap and takes away from some of the shots in the film. Maybe it's not Coscarelli's direction in some of the nature scenes that makes those scenes less impressive. Maybe it's the score, which at times just sounds like the two were dicking around on a Casio. It's just not really that impressive of a score, and I know these two can do better. Seems like they're half-assed effort. Like, they weren't really feeling this movie, and they weren't really into the production, and they weren't very passionate about it, and they just shat out a score. That's really what this seems like. The editing by Don Coscarelli, it's serviceable, it's fine, it's nothing particularly egregious, but it's not as excellent editing. So, yeah, I mean, the cinematography by Darren Arcata, it's also there. Like I was saying earlier, it's 96 minutes, but at times it feels like it's a lot longer than that, especially once Mark Rolston's character and Lance Henriksen get taken out of the picture and Raider starts taking the forefront. Troy from the Goonies. I still can't believe that that was the casting choice. Like, why? And he's so bad that might be the reason why it was shelved for 3 years, because people watched the distributors saw the movie, were like, ooh, God, Steve Antin, he's the anti-actor. No, we don't want to release this in theaters. It'll make people's eyes and asses bleed because of how bad his performance is. We need to save the general public from Steve Antin's acting. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about the movie, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I would give it 2 out of 5. It's a below average flick. It's a movie that, sadly, I really don't have any desire to see again. If I did see it, though, in the wild, like, because I'm a collector, if I saw the DVD somewhere for cheap, yeah, I'm buying it, because it's for the collection. But this is easily the most least impressive film in Don Coscarelli's filmography, if you ask me. I know there are people out there who are fans of it, and to each their own. I'm not. I'm a fan of the concept. I'm a fan of the idea. I like a good amount of the performances, but there are just so many moments in this that are just really flawed, and just so many elements to it that just needed a completely different mix of ingredients. And if it had the better mix, it could be a genuine classic and a real gem, but it just doesn't have the right mix. I would honestly love to see a remake of this. Give it a bigger budget, have more likable characters. Heck, even bring back Lance Henriksen as the survival quest teacher. I'm fine with that. Bring him back and give him more to do, and have a different director and a different writer. I think it could be a decent success, either theatrically or on home video, if it's advertised properly and it's done the right way. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Survival Quest. Probably the longest review of this movie that is in existence currently. I hope you enjoyed it. These are the type of films that, despite how disappointing they can be, I still really love, and I really like digging to find these films and give them a watch, because you never know. You never know. You never know when you're going to find a hidden gem. And if you don't dig, and you don't dig deep, you're not really going to find that many hidden gems. So this was a shot in the dark, and it was a shot worth taking in terms of curiosity. My curiosity is fulfilled, and it's been answered. And yeah, it's one of those films that if you like the trailer, you're a Don Coscarelli fan, or if the idea sounds interesting to you, I would say give it a watch at least once. Maybe you would like it more than me, because ultimately you're the one that is the most important deciding factor when it comes to watching any film. And I do encourage anybody who watches any of my videos to go and see films that they are curious about, whether or not I say good things about them or not. And if you don't think it sounds very good, and you're not really that interested in the idea or the cast, then I would definitely say skip it, because you're not missing anything except some really apocalyptically awful acting by Steve Antin, and a buttload of missed opportunities. But anyway, thank you for watching my review of Survival Quest, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.